Christe Chen was an only child, the light of her parents' lives. She was born in China, but she and her family immigrated to the United States when she was young, and she grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Christe loved traveling, and her mother often accompanied her on her adventures. Christe was kind, generous, and outgoing, which helped her make friends easily, wherever she went. Christe attended Johnson & Wales University, where she enrolled in their pastry program. After graduation, the new pastry chef moved to Denver, Colorado, where she opened the Sweet as Pie Bakery. Christe hoped the bakery would be an inviting gathering place for those in her neighborhood, and she served the classic Southern sweets she had grown up enjoying. New ambitions eventually brought her back to Tennessee. Christe wanted to become a pharmacist, so she enrolled at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center College of Pharmacy. In 2021, she was awarded the Wolters Kluwer Clinical Drug Information Award of Excellence in Clinical Communication for superior verbal and written clinical communication skills. She graduated that same year and accepted a job as a pharmacist at a pharmacy inside of a local Kroger supermarket. Christe was close with her parents and was a joyful presence in the lives of her many friends. Christe's loved ones all knew that she dreamed of one day getting married and having a family. According to one of her friends, Christe would have made a wonderful mother, so these goals made perfect sense. However, it was surprising when Christe did get married because her husband was a man she barely knew. Almost none of her friends had even met him prior to attending his and Christe's wedding reception. On February 18, 2022, 36-year-old Christe married 38-year-old Bradley Robert Dawson, an IT specialist at Youth Villages, a Memphis nonprofit that provides support to at-risk youth. The following day, they held a small reception to celebrate their marriage with their families and closest friends. Their relationship had been a whirlwind romance. They reportedly met in November of 2021 and planned the wedding that took place just 3 months later in just 26 days. Bradley had still been legally married when they started seeing each other. He had gotten married in 2019 and filed for divorce in September of 2021, 2 months before he met Christe. His divorce from his first wife was not finalized until January 11th, 2022, just over a month before his wedding to Christe. While Christe and Bradley did not wait very long to get married, they did have to be more patient when it came to their honeymoon. For the occasion, they traveled to Fiji, where they stayed at the 5-star luxury resort at Turtle Island. The resort is made up of only 14 private villas, so they had to wait several months for availability to book one for their honeymoon. They arrived at the resort on July 7th, 2022. By the following evening, July 8th, while they had just started their trip, the honeymoon appeared to be over, figuratively speaking. The couple seemed happy for most of the evening, but then multiple witnesses saw them have a large argument at a dinner beach party. According to later statements from the Chen family lawyer, Christe learned that night that Bradley had been to the same resort with his previous wife 2 years earlier, and this appears to have been the cause of their argument. A guest staying in a nearby villa later testified that he had seen Christe and Bradley returning to their villa from the beach at approximately 12:25 a.m. on July 9th. About 15 minutes later, he heard loud banging coming from the couple's villa. He then heard one large bang and a single scream, followed by complete silence. The resort staff was notified of the noises coming from Christe and Bradley's villa, but they did not immediately investigate. Resort staff noted that there was a Do Not Disturb sign on Christe and Bradley's door. However, when the couple did not come to breakfast or lunch on July 9th, they became concerned. Around 3 p.m., a member of the resort staff went to the villa and knocked on the door. When no one answered, they entered the villa despite the Do Not Disturb sign. In the bathroom, they found Christe Chen Dawson, unmoving. She was in a pool of blood, stuck between the wall and the smashed toilet, her arm caught in the cracked tank. The room was spattered with blood, and Christe was covered in broken glass. She was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene. Christe's husband Bradley was nowhere to be found. Police began an extensive search for him, but he remained missing for approximately 36 hours. Then he was found on Matakawalevu Island, a few miles away from the Turtle Island resort by water, smelling of alcohol and asking for police. A local man found him as he was walking towards one of the island's villages. He had arrived on the island in a kayak he had stolen from the resort. He was taken to the town of Nadi, on the west coast of Viti Levu, the largest island in Fiji, where he was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. He retained a lawyer and refused to provide a DNA sample as requested by police. Dawson quickly began portraying himself as a victim, telling a reporter during a jailhouse interview that Christe was his everything and that he prayed for her every day. What I can say is I am so sorry for the situation we are all going through now. We were supposed to have amazing holidays, and I lost my wife. Just thinking she is not here anymore is so painful. I am thinking of her all the time. We were supposed to have an amazing life, he said during the same interview. Dawson claimed that Christe's death had been an accident. He said that they had gotten into a drunken argument at the resort, but he could not remember what it was about. He was adamant that their relationship had never been physically violent before, but said that they had gotten into a scuffle when they got back to their villa. He claimed that Christe had shoved him and he had fought back. Christe ended up on the floor and he left the villa, taking a kayak from the resort and eventually making his way to Matakawalevu Island. He claimed that he had left in the kayak to give his wife some space after the argument, arguing that it was not unusual for him to go for a walk after a disagreement. Police did not believe his version of events. Neither the severe damage done to the bathroom in the villa nor Christe's extensive injuries were consistent with the simple scuffle he had described. According to the medical examiner, Christe's injuries were not consistent with a simple accidental fall. They were consistent, however, with her having been repeatedly assaulted. Christe's official cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. She suffered an extreme brain bleed. In addition, her arms were covered in bruises and cuts. There were deep lacerations near her eyes. There was severe swelling around both her eyes and mouth. There was a large laceration, as well as numerous smaller ones, on her back. Christe's parents traveled to Fiji after she was killed, hoping to have her body embalmed so they could bring her back to Memphis with them for burial. Unfortunately, her injuries were too severe for this wish to be accommodated. The lacerations around her eyes specifically were so deep that embalming fluid would have leaked out of them, making it impossible to embalm her. Instead, her remains had to be cremated. In addition, police did not believe Dawson had simply gone out on the kayak to calm down after a fight with his wife. They instead believed that he had been attempting to reach Fiji's main island so he could flee the country when he left the resort in the stolen kayak. When Dawson was found on Matakawalevu Island, he had over $1,000 in cash, both his and Christe's driver's licenses, Christe's credit card, and his passport. While he thought to bring those items with him, he left behind his phone and his GPS watch, which police believed was an intentional choice to prevent them from tracking his position electronically. When Dawson was found, he did have cuts and bruises on his hands and feet, but they appeared to have been from him falling on the coral near where he came ashore. He had no injuries consistent with his wife physically assaulting him. Dawson provided his version of events in his initial interview to police, but he refused to sign his statement at the end of the interview, and his lawyer would legally contest it. Dawson pled not guilty to Christe's murder and publicly maintained his innocence. Dawson's lawyer tried to get him released on bail, arguing that it would be a miscarriage of justice for him to remain in custody when it could be up to 2 years before his trial began. Furthermore, they claimed that Dawson was not in good health and needed to be out on bail so that he could discuss his medications with his doctor over the phone. They also claimed that Dawson's mother was fully dependent on him and that she would mentally suffer if her son were remanded to custody and could not speak to her over the phone regularly. Prosecutors argued that Dawson was a flight risk. While he had surrendered his passport, they believed that his fleeing the crime scene in a kayak demonstrated his willingness to find alternative means to avoid appearing in court. Dawson's lawyer dismissed prosecutors' concerns about Dawson having no ties to Fiji by arguing that he would stay with family friends from America who were living there until his trial. Prosecutors argued that they would not be appropriate sponsors because these American family friends were people Dawson had just met on the day of Christe's death, and one of them was facing rape charges in Fiji. The judge agreed with prosecutors, and Dawson remained in custody, awaiting trial. Dawson's 8-day trial was held in late September and early October of 2024. He did not testify on his own behalf, and his lawyers called no witnesses. Dawson's defense was centered around his new version of events that occurred just before he left the resort in the kayak, which differed from his initial statements to police after his arrest. He now claimed that Christe had fallen down drunk and caused all of her injuries herself. A verdict in the case was not handed down for several weeks. Ultimately, the court did not accept Dawson's version of events, given the nature and extent of Christe's injuries. On December 11, 2024, Dawson was found guilty of Christe's murder. Dawson was formally sentenced on February 12, 2025. The law in Fiji mandated that he be given a life sentence for his murder conviction. However, it also required that a judge enact a minimum sentence, after which Dawson could apply for parole. Justice Riaz Hamza set that minimum at 18 years in prison for Dawson. Justice Hamza was highly critical of Dawson, his crime, and his actions after he committed it. Your conduct after the incident was appalling. Having inflicted serious and life-threatening injuries to the deceased, you fled the scene of the crime, leaving the deceased alone and helpless, he told Dawson at the sentencing hearing. Even if Dawson is initially denied parole after 18 years, he still has some hope of finding freedom and peace one day, which Christe's parents do not. Both of them provided victim impact statements at Dawson's sentencing. "She was my only child, my little girl, and my reason for living. Each day since her death has been a struggle to find meaning in a life that now feels empty," Christe's father, Chen, said in his statement. "No mother should have to know this is how her daughter's life ended, and by the hands of the very person who took a vow to love, honor, and cherish her. I can only hope that the rest of your life is filled with misery, loneliness, and despair," Christe's mother, Xiao Wei Liu, told Dawson during her statement, expressing a hope that I'm sure many of us share.